Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining me. We're going to spend the next few minutes talking a little bit about American dialects and accents. I'm super excited about this presentation, so bear with me if I start talking a little bit faster. Let's get started. It may be hard to believe, but overall, American accents are typically conservative. They preserve the features of English speech at the time the particular American region was settled. Many of the immigrants to America in the 18th century came from northern England, Ireland, and Scotland, areas that weren't affected by sound changes in London. Some people claim that the American accent sounds closer to how Shakespeare would have spoken than a modern London accent does. As far as the different American accents go, we see the most variety on the eastern seaboard, and the farther west we go, the more uniform the accent. Public education and the ability to easily migrate and engage with other cultural groups are two things that contribute to the evenness of most American accents. Dialectologists typically divide American speech into three main regional accents, although there may be upwards of 9 distinct accents depending on which linguist you read. The three main accents are Northeastern, Southern, and General American. Of course, there's a historical basis for why American accents are the way they are. Although the majority of colonists came from England to Massachusetts, later arrivals eventually settled north or south of that colony to find cheaper land or more freedom. The southern colonies, too, were mostly settled by Brits, but the makeup of this group was more diverse. Let's not forget that Georgia was originally a penal colony, so it's comprised of prisoners, and we also see a lot of indentured servants and political refugees. Many of the people settling the South Atlantic colonies didn't want to be there, and they were by and large from a different social class than those settling Massachusetts, so the accents of the settlers was removed from what we saw in New England. The mid-Atlantic states were mostly settled by non-English immigrants, and so those accents are even more diverse than the Northeastern and Southern, which are oftentimes seen as two ends of a spectrum. The interior colonies and unsettled territories were eventually claimed by a mixture of English, Scots-Irish, and German immigrants who came into contact with Native Americans and European traders. The language contact zones and mixing of accents were unprecedented. As they moved further west, the adventurous settlers expanded their linguistic networks and eventually developed a more even accent than on the eastern seaboard. There are some general features about the American accents that linguistics point out. Most varieties are rhotic, with the notable exception of New England, and they claim the South, but I don't agree with that. We typically see the pronunciation distinction of W and HW preserved by older speakers, regardless of region. Compared to English accents, American accents preserve a stress on the penultimate syllable of words 4 or more syllables in length. So the British would say secretary, but Americans pronounce every syllable to say secretary. And finally, there aren't any American accents wherein H dropping is standard. So now we are going to start going through the aspects and best known traits of the standout accents. I'm not going to limit this to the three main accents either, because that just wouldn't be fun. The New England accent typically preserves the W and HW distinction and is non-rhotic. Linguists have noted, however, that younger generations, city dwellers, and educated groups are consciously moving away from the R-dropping accents of their parents. We'll find unique vocabulary throughout the regional varieties, but somehow the New England variety tends to stand out. For example, their tendency to call a liquor store a packy. Its phonological aspect and unique vocabulary have in the last few decades been a cause of parody rather than its previous marker for cultural elitism. And I'm going to post a video from the one of the Super Bowl commercials where this is very much parody. We have the so-called JFK accent. Sorry about this. Park the car in Harvard Yard has lost its prestige among American speakers. The New York accent is a sub-regional accent fitting into neither the Northeastern nor Mid-Atlantic group easily. Difficult accents like this are the reason that saying we have only 3 American accents is reductive. The New York accent covers the city of New York and surrounding areas, including parts of New Jersey and Connecticut, and is the result of hyperexposure to more accents than practically anywhere else in the U.S. for a sustained period of time. New York's cultural and linguistic diversity has only grown, even though it no longer sees European immigrants in droves as it did before World War II. The New York accent can be classified as non-rhotic. It drops final R's, but linking and intrusive R are usual. This means that the letter R may appear in places we don't expect, like idea. Okay, let's talk about the Southern drawl. And before I get into the Southern drawl, just note, I disagree with a lot of what's being said as someone who grew up in the South, the deep South. I've observed such an accentual variety that I have a hard time accepting that geographical region as a uniform accent group. But we're still going to look at what the linguists say, and you can make your own observations. Okay, so linguists divide the Southern accent into coastal Southern and inland Southern. Nope. But again, sticking to the text. Coastal stretches from the Atlantic coast in Virginia to the Gulf Coast of Texas, and inland extends from West Virginia west to Oklahoma. Inland speech retains R's before consonants and at the end of words, while coastal speech is more likely to be non-rhotic. We're told that we don't see a linking or intrusive R in Southern accents, but I beg to differ. This is such a large, diverse area, and it includes so many different heritage groups that I can't honestly say that I see enough similarities between a West Virginian accent, a Florida accent, and an Arkansas accent to group them together. I can't. But perhaps your observation's different, and that is okay. That is perfectly okay. You do not have to agree with me. Okay, the Western accent covers a large area of the Western U.S. from the Canadian border to the Mexican border, through the Rocky Mountains and to the Pacific. It's such a broad area with so many different cultural groups that it is likely more variable than linguists would have us believe. This accent tends to include Spanish loanwords more than any other accents, but that too depends on the specific area. It's a very young accent region compared to the rest of the U.S., and so we could see more changes in it in the years to come. Okay, so General American is something that it's different, and I have to grapple with it, but that's okay. Linguists, especially British linguists, say that American accents carry little local variation in matters of pronunciation. And I suppose compared to the variety in Britain, that may be the case. This supposed evenness of accent is caused by several factors that have already been discussed, but standardized education and the use of network English on television are two that are most frequently pointed out. The linguists claim that there are no marked regional characteristics in General American. That is to say, if you were to speak to someone with a General American accent, you wouldn't be able to pinpoint where they come from. Americans travel a lot, we migrate, and linguists point to this tendency as a reason that the accent is so even. Okay, so we're going to get to this next bit in a later lecture, but I just want to introduce the difference between dialect and Creole now. So during this lecture, I've been speaking about accent as an element of dialect. Dialect is a particular form of a language peculiar to a specific region or social group. Dialect is comprised of both lexical and phonological idiosyncrasies. A Creole is a mother tongue formed through the contact of two languages. For example, British colonialism led to diglossic situations in many of their colonies. The English language was imported and would coexist with the native language. To communicate between languages, a pidgin would develop, and from the pidgin, native speakers would grow up blending the languages. A pidgin language, by the way, is a grammatically simplified means of communication that develops between two or more unintelligible languages. The best known example of an English Creole is Gula, which appears on the South Carolina and Georgia islands. There's going to be a sample of on the course webpage if you want to know what Gula sounds like. Okay, quick and dirty American accents. Thanks for listening. I was really excited. I don't know if you could tell. As always, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email, and I hope you all have a great day.